It's an amazing thing, actually, to sort of
I'm here with Jason, the Dark Lord Vandenberg.
He's making it easier for the world to understand, and he's making it new.
There's an incredible future for him.
You are a truly wonderful artist.
The possibilities for him are limitless.
I moved to Huntington Beach because, I married my wife, Nicole, and we were thinking we want to start a family. You go where you can afford.
That is causing a delay.
每一次直播准备，凹造型，准备好直播内容，维护好粉丝，维护好消费者，然后你就是神一样的存在。
大家好，我是雨
Without anyone noticing, it seems that live streaming has become the hottest online trend in China.
Compared to everyone my size, I was the strongest man on the planet. But I felt like the person I was completely constructed. There was a whole bunch that was missing.
It was almost like Matt died.
If you show up here in long hair and boobs, I'm going the other way.
Hello, this is Chuck Braverman. This is Westdoc Online, episode number 11. If you were watching this live, you might have noticed that this segment had no audio in it, which I didn't discover until after the fact. Fixed it later on in the show. But here we are. That's the joy of doing something live and as a one-man show. Today's episode is all about Hotdocs International Film Festival from Toronto, Canada. It's the largest doc film festival in the world, and I think it's, without doubt, certainly, if not the best, one of the best 2 or 3 festivals anywhere. And if you love docs, you need to go to Toronto. April 30th to May 4th this year. They have over 200 films. Most of them are brand new. There are Canadian premieres, North American premieres, world premieres, international premieres. And what I've done is I've gone through a lot of the films and picked out 5 which I think are really terrific and worth seeing. And on this show, we're going to interview the 5 directors of these films. You've seen the clips in the tease just before this. I want to thank our sponsor, Momentous Insurance, and especially Winnie Wong, who is my broker at Momentous Insurance. And if you need E&O insurance, Winnie is certainly the person to talk to if you're making documentaries. If you don't know what E&O insurance is, you really need to speak to Winnie. It's errors and omissions insurance, and it's something you have to have if you're going to sell your project to any broadcaster or cablecaster or anyone where the public is going to see the show. So call Winnie at Momentous Insurance. So we have 5 films today. They're from 5 different directors all over the planet. If you like this show, tweet something out on Twitter, like us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube, and let's get on with the first segment. Our guest is Michael Del Monte, coming to us from Toronto. So Michael Del Monte in Toronto, Canada, has made a fascinating film, and I'm going to let Michael tell us how this film came about and what it's about. Michael.
Yeah, sure. So the film's called Transformer, and I've been doing some filming in the muscle space, kind of interested in why, particularly men, why they gain muscle, what their obsession is to change the shape of their body, and they get all this confidence and courage after they've put on slabs of muscle. So I was always interested in that as a subject. And then in July of 2015, a colleague of mine told me the story that there was this world record power lifter, professional bodybuilder who was just outed as being transgender and was going to make an attempt at becoming a woman. And at the time, she was 43 years old, still living as a male. And I knew it was going to be quite a journey to try and fit into society, because you have the obvious 250 pounds of muscle, and to try and become a woman in that shape would pose some challenges, how people would perceive you, how your family and all this. So I drove down to meet her, and we kind of discussed the idea of doing a documentary together, what that would look like to follow the transition. And 2 years later, we had the film. So, the film really documents her it finishes at the end, back and forth of her trying to make this journey.
So, what does that mean? You were filming in the muscle space? That sounds like an advertising agency expression. I mean, you were. Do you work out yourself?
A little bit. It's an interesting subject. I mean, who are you really? Are you who you are when you look in the mirror? Are you your physical appearance? A lot of these people who devote so much of their lives to transforming their physical body, that becomes their identity, and it's hard to separate themselves from that. So it made for a great subject.
So let's take a look at the trailer here.
From as far back as I can remember, I've had two desires: to be strong and to be a woman. I just never knew how I could have both. Growing up basically poor white trash, I definitely had issues with feeling less. I hated that feeling of vulnerability and weakness.
Grand Rapids Championships, Matt Kozaleski.
The harder I pushed the weights, the bigger and stronger I got, the better I felt. Compared to everyone my size, I was the strongest man on the planet. But I felt like the person I was completely constructed. There was a whole bunch that was missing.
It was almost like Matt died.
If you show up here in long hair and boobs, I'm going the other way.
I want my boys to be able to be proud of me. I don't think I'm comfortable as an extremely muscular woman, but as a guy, that's the only way I'm comfortable.
Let's go, man, come on.
There's just this feeling of being pulled between two worlds.
Lovely to see you.
Yes.
Let's go! Oh, there he goes!
How am I ever gonna find peace being comfortable in my own skin?
Wow, pretty amazing, actually. It's particularly interesting to me because about, 6 or 7, 8 years ago, my wife and I made a film about female bodybuilders called Twisted Sisters. and I'll send you a link afterwards.
I'd love to see that.
And so we were around them quite a bit and going to all the competitions, and so I showed her this morning the trailer that we just watched, thinking, well, I mean, and it was the film was my wife's project that I joined her with, and she came in and watched the film, and when Matt became Janae and the wig and all that, she gasped, really, and she was like sort of stunned, and not much stuns her. Tell us so you started filming and you got onto something that you thought was good, and then what happened? I noticed you have a deal, or it's on distribution, it says CBC and a bunch of others. I mean, where did you have a deal with somebody going in, or did it happen? Did you show a cut, or what was the process?
Yeah, the deal was basically initially between Janae and I, that I gained her trust and got kind of her life rights to be able to pitch the story, and I had done a few shoots, just her and I, and then I put the documents together, like a little teaser and a little pitch, and it sold really quick. We had a lot of interest, but the company in Canada, it's a strand of CBC, which is our Canadian Broadcast Corporation. So it's a tax funded corporation. They do a lot of funding for projects. They jumped on it right away, and they said they get pitched 5 different transgender pieces every week, and the boss at the time there said, I showed this to my teenage kids and they said, Dad, you've got to make this film. And so he called me back right away and said, how can we do this with you? I think he understood the approach I was trying to take, which wasn't sensational, but was much more, much more heartfelt, much more of it was much more just kind of a human going on a journey, and that person just happened to have a very unique struggle. So anyway, CBC came on, and we got our funding, and then May. So I contacted Janae. The timeline was basically October of 2015, and then for about 6 months it was her and I doing a couple shoots, and then as of May I had a crew of about 3 or 4 at the most, and we followed for a full year, and then it was out the following fall, so fall 2017.
So was CBC the main backer of the film, and did they give you notes on the film? Do this, do that, and who has final cut and who owns the film when you're a Canadian doing the CBC deal?
So the money, I believe, came from 4 different envelopes. So I think there was, CBC came in for some, and then we got something called the POV fund. We got the Canadian Media Fund, and we also got a small grant from the Ted Rogers Fund, which they announce at Hotdocs every year. I think it was those 4. And the only person who had any creative suggestions, there's no final cut. So the final cut is up to ultimately me and my producers, but I'd have to go read the fine print on which are people who I trusted, who are outside of CBC. CBC came back, they saw the rough cut, and they came back with a few notes, and they weren't mandatory. They were suggestions, and if they made sense, I addressed them, and if not, I was able to have a good conversation with them and say why I didn't feel they made sense. So it was an amazing process, to be honest. I'm hoping I get to do another project with them, because we got to make pretty much what I wanted to make. So yeah, I can't complain.
I noticed in your bio that you have a master's degree in theology and philosophy at the University of Toronto. What, if any, impact did that background have on your making the film and what was going on?
When approaching this film, I wasn't interested in all of the frequently asked questions of transgenderism. I wanted to go really deep on just a couple things. and that was the way, you know, I tried to approach it. The way I try to approach all my work is kind of try and, as well as having the story, try and find those themes, that those one or two things that you think you can tease out and find those layers to. So I'd say that would probably be the biggest thing, is not trying to rush too quickly to the next branch and to the next category, to answer all the questions or to resolve every situation. But wow, you know, how is she going to do moving forward? There's no conclusion that I wanted to offer. I wanted to kind of make sure the audience was treated like a mature audience and was able to ask enough questions that would have them leave the theater and keep having a conversation with their friends.
Hao Wu is the director of People's Republic of Desire, a film about live streaming and the consequences, good, bad, and otherwise. And let's say hello to Mr. Wu, who is coming to us from his office in New York City. Hi, how are you doing?
Hi, Chuck. Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Good seeing you. Congratulations on getting into Hotdocs. Have you been there before?
Yeah, I've been to Hotdocs before. Pitching, I went to Hotdocs and pitched a project a few years back. But I don't think I've been back since. So it's pretty exciting to be going back there with a film screening at the festival.
Were you pitching at the forum? Was that the idea? Or
I
just
was.
pitching? Yeah, I've been to Hotdocs maybe 8 or 10 times, and I just think it's the best festival, and I'm excited about going back this year again. It's really fabulous. Will you tell us a little bit about your film before we run the trailer and then really get into the weeds, so to speak? Tell us about how it came about and what it's about.
So the film basically follows the lives of two live streaming internet celebrities in China, following their lives over a 2-year period. And so as an audience, we watch their lives become more and more intertwined with their online presence, and they get more and more sucked into their into the internet, and they make more money, they become more famous, but also as they're searching for happiness, are they truly going to be happy online? So that's the question I'm trying to answer with the film, and also trying to encourage the viewers to ask themselves, as we're spending more and more time on the internet, as our lives become more and more dependent on technology, are we truly happier?
Well, that's the question. Are we truly happier? Well, let's take a look at the trailer, and then we can talk about the film. Here we go.
怎么样修炼成大主播？现在粉丝很难留，对，一定要注意好好维护。每一次直播准备，凹造型，准备好直播内容，维护好粉丝，维护好消费者，然后你就是神一样的存在。
大家好，我是雨
Without anyone noticing, it seems that live streaming has become the hottest online trend in China.
一台电脑、一个摄像头、一副耳机麦克风，就可以在家里进行网络直播。
吃饭的、唱歌的、打游戏的、逛街的、搭讪聊天的，无所不有。
一个网红一个月可以挣10几万、几十万，甚至是上百万。
It's a terrific trailer, and I knew the minute that I saw the trailer that I wanted to interview you and meet you and talk about the film because part of the reason I'm doing this show is because live streaming is now available. And here we are, you know, in 2 different cities. And I'm struck by one of the facts from your press kit that you say, I'm not surprised, but I'm struck by live streamers can earn as much as $200,000 a month, and virtual relationships can replace real life connections. So can we get into that a little bit? I mean, where do we start? What is this film about? Making money, or is it about relationships, or what is it?
It's about technology and the impact it has on young people. So the story is set in China because in many ways China can be viewed as have leapfrogged the West in terms of a technological adoption. So smartphone technology and many other technology, including live streaming, have found much widespread adoption among arguably among the young people in China. And live streaming, in some ways, it's kind of uniquely Chinese phenomenon, even though here in the US, we have Twitch for gaming live streaming, and also Facebook Live and Periscope, and many other live streaming apps. However, in China, live streaming has become a mainstream form of interactive entertainment. So I kind of, you know, use live streaming as a way to explore the questions that that the TV series Black Mirror has been asking over and over again. Basically, as our life become, you know, our real world life become more intertwined with our online lives, what happens?
Are they following people on Facebook, or YouTube, like we do here? And I'm thinking in particular about, you know, the top 3 dozen YouTube innovators, providers, whatever, you know, the Casey Neistats of the world. Are there? I'm sure there must be, right, in China?
Chinese government has blocked the access to popular Western websites like Facebook and YouTube. So, but China has its own copycat equivalents of YouTube, for example. So they are online celebrities who are just like YouTubers who record their lives, posting their videos online. But live streaming is kind of pushing this type of online celebrity worship and monetary transaction to the extreme, because unlike a YouTube video or YouTube stars recording his or her lives, live streaming is all live. So a lot of people interacting with the live streamers as well as interacting among themselves in the live streaming showroom. So in many ways, you can view live streaming as just a more interactive version of a YouTube page, where when the live streamers are doing something live and their fans are frantically typing messages or buying them digital gifts. That's how live streamers make money in China.
So what are they? I don't. So we don't have anything comparable to that. I don't think of buying digital gifts. So how does that work? What do they buy them, and what do they get, and what are the numbers?
So like in the US, a lot of Instagram celebrities and YouTube celebrities, they make money through sponsorships, as, you know, basically promoting certain type of products and getting money from the advertisers. But in Asia, digital gifting and this kind of microtransactions are much more prevalent. So if I'm a fan of a live streamer, if I really like the live streamer's performance, I can spend, let's say, $100 buying the live streamer's 20 digital diamond rings. And I send these 20 digital diamond rings to the live streamer. So the live streamer can get a cut of the money I spend on buying those diamond rings. So it's a monetary transaction, but It's not just based on money. It's kind of being masked by a much more fun way of this kind of financial transaction, which is through digital gifting. So you can buy digital lollipops, digital diamond rings, and digital lipsticks, for example.
It seems to be going backwards in a way too. I remember in an office I worked at about 10 years ago, there was a phase when people were buying things online and building a digital world. And they were really sort of playing a second life. Maybe that's what it was even called. Is that right? And
that's right.
And so, but it seems to have gone in another direction here. But so buying a digital diamond for somebody, I mean, it seems kind of sort of bizarre, doesn't it? I'm trying to understand it, and especially if the money, the dollars are big. You know, if you're talking about $1 or $2 as well, but if you're talking about, you know, $100, or explain that, can you? Is that explainable?
I guess that's part of the cultural difference. Like in East Asia, in Japan, China, and South Korea, and Taiwan, for example, in Asian countries, this kind of digital gifts have, you know, always been there since the start of the internet almost. Whereas in the US, this type of spending money for some kind of digital avatar, digital gifts have never taken off. So it's a little hard to explain just over a call, but if you watch my film, I think you'll understand it.
How has this affected you, this online presence in China that's so successful? What has it done, if anything, to actual relationships with, you know, boy meets girl, whatever?
In China, as here in the US, I think we have dating websites, we have YouTube-like websites, we have Facebook-like websites. So I think young people today are just like young kids here in America. They're always glued to their phones. They're always checking messages, wanting to post something online, being liked by someone. So I think the themes I'm exploring with my film, I think it's not rather China specific. I think it's more universal in terms of how dependent we are on technology. Yes. And technology has made this promise of connecting us. But what does that virtual connection mean? Is that enough? Are we going to be happy with a lot of virtual interaction, but very little real life human connection? So I think, you know, once you get a chance to watch my film, you will see that these two live streamers featured in my film, they came from nothing. They were nobody. They had only barely any high school education. But with the explosion of live streaming and internet technologies in China, they have been able to make it to become multimillionaires. But their lives they're spending more and more of their time and their life online, while, you know, kind of ignoring their real life human relationships, and then they're kind of miserable. So that, I mean, with my film, I'm just simply trying to encourage the audience to really think about their own relationships with technology.
I noticed in the show notes that you are a former executive of Alibaba and TripAdvisor, which is unusual because I don't speak to too many documentary filmmakers that have that kind of background. I'm wondering how, you know, what did you do at these, what kind of work did you do, and how did you make the transition into producing, directing documentaries?
So at Alibaba, I was their group advertising operations director. So I was in charge of the ad operations for the entire Alibaba group, including Yahoo China and Taobao and Alibaba. And at TripAdvisor, I was their China country manager. So I set up the subsidiary for TripAdvisor in China, hired people, and set up the entire operation there. But ever since I was a kid, I had always been interested in storytelling. So even though I was having my business career, I was doing some kind of small-time filmmaking on the side. And my last film was called The Road to Fame, about Chinese kids and China's top acting academy. You know, they did a Broadway musical Fame as their graduation showcase. So I filmed that on the side. I put it away for a long time. So in 2011, I decided to take a break from my work to really focus on finishing that film. But, you know, I gave myself 6 months break, which became 1 year, a year and a half, and 2 years. It took me a long time to finish that film. By the time I finished it, I realized I'm really passionate about doing storytelling full-time. So that's why I'm a full-time filmmaker now.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me. See you in Toronto.
Hello. Okay, we're back. We're getting audio this time. That's nice. I think I figured out what the problem was. What I didn't say earlier at the beginning of the show, obviously that interview was pre-taped. And this show has been live, 9 out of 10 of the episodes, or 8 out of 10 of the episodes has been live. I'm live here now doing these wraparounds, and this time with audio. And the reason is because the 1 or 2 filmmakers said, well, I'm not available on Wednesday morning, but I can do it another time. And I wanted to have, what are the most stimulating and exciting films coming up. And so I pre-recorded one, and suddenly before I knew it, I was pre-recording then. And the next one I pre-recorded, it's Paul Damien Williams from Australia. And I don't know what time zone they're separated by, not only time zone, but by days. So I thought it'd be better to do it this way. And also, Hotdocs is April 30th to May 4th. And like I said, it's a wonderful conference and festival, and they have workshops. They have something called the Forum there, which is all about pitching to international buyers. But to me, as a filmmaker, what's so great about the Forum is that it is inspiring and encouraging, because you see there are still great films that are going to be made next year. Just when you think everything has turned into a reality show. No, there really are great documentaries coming down the pike. And this next interview is, I think, one of those films. Let's take a look at that interview now. This is a pre-recorded interview with director Paul Williams on the feature documentary Guru Mall. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. We'll find out in a second. But
that's quite a good attempt.
Let's take a quick look at the trailer.
When you talk about Koromol, it's a big story.
Maraya ko Jeffrey Koromol yun po yung paunwa nga pujara galin po marang ulidualan yaman ike yukurami aman.
We are the different two worlds here. The one world is Malanda and the other world is Yolngo. He's making it easier for the world to understand, and he's making it new.
There's an incredible future for him.
You are a truly wonderful artist.
The possibilities for him are limitless.
When you're carrying the two worlds on your back, what do you feel? How do you feel? The world pulling you down, or is it making you standing up?
You're going to have to get used to doing this, you know that, don't you?
So the world wants to know more about him. closing their eyes and open their hearts, they'll see him clear.
Who can see with your heart to taste the salt water and fresh water. Mayro pijanana magam.
Yo, Lincoln.
Well, I'm doing this because of the strength of that trailer alone, and I think it looks fantastic, and I'm curious how you got involved in this project, and tell us a little bit about your background, please, Paul.
Okay. Well, my background is I'm an Australian-based filmmaker, documentarian. I worked mainly in editing for 16, 17 years, something like that. And basically, I got sore back and tired of a dark room. And I really sort of was always attracted to producing and directing. Not that I produced this film, I just directed it and wrote and directed it. I was living in Darwin, which is the northernmost capital in Australia, about 2,500 kilometres from Melbourne and Sydney, and you know the big capital cities you'd be familiar with in North America. And this wonderful character, Gurumul, entered my orbit. I was working for his record label as an in-house filmmaker, more or less. And a Melbourne-based producer, Shannon Swan, came up and was living briefly in Darwin and put the idea to me and his management, Mark Gross, who and his musical collaborator, Michael Honan, both of whom appear in the film quite extensively. And we started a film. Started documenting his life story about 5 years ago now. So it was a film that took us about 4 years to make from start to finish. So that's it in a nutshell.
And when you first started going to his home or the area where he lived, how were you received, and what kind of culture shock was there, and what was that like?
Look, it's an interesting question, Chuck. Arnhem Land, probably just look at it on your map if you want to familiarise yourself. It's as far away from Melbourne or Sydney really as you can get in Australia, and it's subtropical, so there's a wet season and a dry season. So for half the year, it's inaccessible apart from light aircraft. So it's incredibly remote to the extent that the indigenous culture that exists up there is to a certain degree unchanged. And I'll give you an example. Like Gurumul himself, English was his fifth or sixth language. So he fluently spoke his mother and father's tongue, and then his maternal and paternal grandparents' languages, and then the lingua franca of that area, a language called Jumba Pingu, and then English after that. So it's really, to the uninitiated, when you get, or the unfamiliar, when you get to a place like Alka Island or any of the remote areas in this part of northeast Arnhem Land, in the top end of Australia, it effectively feels like you're in another country. English is spoken, but not well, and as I said, often as people's sixth language. So Yeah, when I first got there, I said to Mark, look, I don't mind being thrown in the deep end of the pool, but don't drain all the water out before you push me in. It felt very shocking, and it did take a long time to acclimatise myself, because things are done very differently out there, and the film goes into that in its way.
So I noticed that in the opening card, I mean, this is like two questions in one. It's a warning about dead people, and then I've done research. And you want to tell us about what's happened to him since?
Okay, look, it's a really interesting. It's a really interesting question, and there's parallels I know with First Nation peoples in the United States and Canada as well. With the Yolngu clan nation that Gurumul belonged to, because he died 12 months ago, just 3 days after we completed this film. What happens after someone's death is that the name, image, and any voice recording are retired, not permanently, but for a period that's determined by the families. So that can be up to a decade. It can be longer. Usually, it's between 1 and 5 years. So our expectation when we finished this film was, despite having worked on it for 4 years, that it would be retired and it wouldn't be screened. But after his tribal funeral in Alpha Island last November, there was a meeting, and a couple of things that happened, Chuck. Firstly, the prevalence of social media, in particular Facebook, in the Yolngu world, despite being so remote, is very, very prevalent. So a lot of the cultural practices with regards to death were being overlooked by the younger generation, posting photographs and tributes, that kind of thing, because it's so much part of their vernacular now. And the other thing is that the tribal elders knew how significant a cultural character Gurumul was, so they made an exception for him. So we've been allowed to, on a one-off basis, screen the film at various film festivals: Berlin, Melbourne International Film Festival, quite a few others. But more recently, it's been allowed to go into to open release. So that's why we have a couple of title cards. We didn't change the film after he died. We just added a couple of title cards at the very start of the film to explain that situation, because it is so unusual.
So did he die because he didn't have proper medical care, or were there other things going on? I mean, or do you not know?
Well, it depends on who you ask. But from what I know, is that like many Indigenous Australians, he suffered from kidney problems and required dialysis. So for the last 2 years of his life, his kidney function increasingly become poorer until he was reliant on dialysis 3 times a week. And that I know of, in the last 12 months of his life, he was in ICU about 7 times. So intensive critical care unit, that means, because he was non-compliant with his, he'd do dialysis for 2 or 3 weeks and then feel great and just refused treatment. So in the end, he refused treatment. And there was quite a lot of controversy in Australia, because there's a beach in Darwin, which is maybe 500 kilometres from his home on Alpha Island, and he went down there effectively to die amongst his people, and who would gather there, and the fact he wasn't in hospital, there was quite a lot of controversy around that at the time.
So the one thing that I think is missing, if I can criticize, and I'm sure there may be legal questions on the trailer, it doesn't seem to be much music of his in the trailer. So let me run this clip, if it's all right with you, which sort of helps to put things in perspective a bit. Here we go.
Every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you.
Yeah, so that's a clip with Gurumul singing with Sting on the French TV show Taratata. You're saying there's not much music. Well, there's not much in the trailer, but there's plenty in the film. Proper, believe me.
I know that because I've actually seen the list of the credits with all the music cuts in it. And I must say, when I was making the choices here of which films to sort of preview in this show, I started listening to his music, and it's quite hypnotic. There's something about his voice that's very special. I can't quite put my finger on what it is.
Yeah.
But what is it?
Well, I mean, I've been involved in this project for 7 years now, like start to finish, and I'm still no closer to being able to really define what that quality is. He's an incredible singer. There's no doubt about it, with a very unique voice, and very popular in Australia and Kingdom, France, Germany, Switzerland, through quite a lot of Europe. And at 2009, he had a planned like a very large promotional tour planned for the United States, which he just didn't show up for the plane. So in terms of his exposure to your country, the film actually goes into that. It's one of the really quite dramatic moments in the film. There's this, the whole idea of breaking into the US market, and he just doesn't get on the plane because something culturally comes up on his island that's just much more important than than the mores of being an internationally renowned musician.
Our next filmmaker is Luciana Kaplan, who is originally from Argentina and I believe is currently living in Mexico City, and has a film on the subject and topic that I think most of us can relate to. Hello, Luciana. How are you?
Hello. I'm fine. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We're glad to have you. Where are you right now? Are you in Mexico?
I'm in Mexico City. I've been living in Mexico City since I was 3. So I'm actually Mexican. My family is from Argentina, but we moved here when I was 3. So I've been living here since. And I'm in Mexico City right now.
So a silly question, but I mean, is the Argentinian Spanish much different? Is there much of an accent from the Mexican Spanish to yes?
Very different. Argentina have very heavy accent. It sounds like a lot like Italian. So it sounds like Italian speaking in Spanish. So it's very easy to recognize people from Argentina because they have this really, really like very heavy accents. So yeah, it's very different.
And do you have an accent?
I have a strange accent. I have to say, it's not Argentinian, it's not Mexican, but everybody keep asking me, "Where are you from? Your accent is so strange." I say, "Well, I'm from here, so I don't know." But I suppose I have more like a Mexican accent.
And where did you learn English in school or somewhere else?
I learned English at school. Then my parents put me like an English teacher, which he was like a very good teacher. So that's where I learned, I think, because I went to. I mean, like the school I went it wasn't like bilingual, so it wasn't like I had a very good English education then.
Can you tell us a little bit first, before we get into your film, about documentary production in Mexico right now? What's the background? And I understand that you're a teacher and you coordinate the classes and everything else. Tell us a little bit about what's going on there.
Well, I think it's very exciting what is going on with documentary right now, because there's a lot of production and the best films are documentaries. If you compare like fiction to documentary production, I could say the documentary film is much more like powerful. Like the subjects are like very interesting. Maybe because what is going on in Mexico is really harsh. So documentarians are trying to tell what is going on. So the subjects are much more like strong. And I think there's a big documentary community now, which is young. I mean, we are all kind of the same like generation. So if you see in most of the festivals, like the good films from Mexico are documentary films, not fiction so much. So I think it's interesting what's going on. We still have a very big like problem with distribution, but I think that's like the same all over the world. But there's a lot of good films that go to festivals and win like a lot of awards, but then it's hard to see them,
Your film, what's the length of Rush Hour?
It's 83 minutes.
And so when you say there's a problem with distribution, do good documentaries get decent distribution in Mexico and South America and the Spanish-speaking world, or is just documentaries in general that you're speaking about, or what?
No, I think what's happening in Mexico is because of the there's this like trade with the United States where all the theaters, they just prefer to show American films. So it's very hard for Mexican films to be in the theaters. They don't get like enough support. So it's not because of the length, it's not because of the subject, it's just that there's a lot of like pressure for the distributors that American films should make like a lot of money, and they don't like competition. So there is not like enough support, and
But we'll run your trailer in a minute, but tell us a little bit about the film first, and then we'll take a look.
Well, Rush Hour, it's a documentary film about the daily odyssey of going to work in 3 cities, in Mexico City, in Los Angeles, and Istanbul. So I wanted to talk about loneliness, about how like the people in big cities that commute more than like 6 hours per day. There's like an emotional cost of it. So the film is focused on that. Like all the hours that we're spending on traffic, and that means that we're not seeing our family, our kids, our partners, and that's making like a big impact on our lives. So that's the film. That's what the film about.
So let's take a look at this, the trailer for Rush Hour, if I can make this work here.
Yani mahallemde çoğu kadın, bayanlar çalışmıyor. Yani kendi paramı kendim kazanıyorum.
I moved to Huntington Beach because, I married my wife, Nicole, and we were thinking we want to start a family. You go where you can afford it.
That is causing a delay.
Tenemos 24 años viviendo ahí en Ecatepec.
La vivienda es más barata, pero los sueldos son muy bajos.
Muchas señoras, igual que son mamás solteras y todo eso, se vienen a trabajar hasta acá, buscándole pues donde les paguen más.
Yani ben sabah evden çıktığımda Harun'la ve Leyla'dan çok hani arkamdan yani.
Hopefully, because it's a little later, I won't have that much traffic, but we'll see.
Maybe.
Hopefully, I'll get home tonight before you're asleep.
Hopefully.
Zor yani. Şimdi 7 sene karşıya gidip gel. Henüz onu yapamadım. O bir an sevgisiz kalır mı diye çok düşünüyorum.
Cosas feas y malas, pues sí me han pasado muchas. Es muy fácil que te dicen, es que tienes que olvidarlo. Y te la pasas chillando en el metro, en el camión, por todos lados y te dicen, no llores.
I was on the road 5 hours today, so by the end of this work week, that's 25 hours. That's 52 days a year in a car, on a freeway, just, to make a living. None of us are getting any of these days back.
Well, it certainly looks slick and professional and something that everybody can identify with, or most people can identify with. How did you get the film going, and tell us a little bit about the financing, the shooting, the production, the time length, and that sort of thing, please.
We asked for funding, and they this kind of tax reduction program that we have in Mexico, and they gave it to us very quick. So we had like all the money, but we didn't have like characters, or we didn't have anything at all. So we started like filming, but at the same time we were researching, and that took us like 3 years to shoot, to research, shoot, a post-production. It was like 3 years. So how everything came together, and I could say that the hardest part was the editing part, because there was like so many options to tell the story.
My next guest is director Jean-Simon Chatier, coming from Montreal, Canada. And good morning to you. Good afternoon in Montreal. How are you? Is it snowing there?
It's snowing and raining, and all of this is becoming rain, ice actually, so it's not very pretty.
Well, it's sort of coincidental that we have a couple of films from Canada. Montreal happens to be a wonderful, beautiful city that I used to go to quite a bit. And you are the director of a new documentary film called Playing Hard. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the film before we run the trailer, and then get into more detail, please?
Yeah, basically it's 4 years in the creation of For Honor, which is a game where Vikings, samurai, and knights are fighting to control the world and gain power. So as the production grows from 40 people to more than 500, we kind of witness a bit of drama, fears, hope, and a lot of emotions.
And how did you get onto this game in the first place? I mean, are you a gamer, or how did you hear about this, or how did this start, and how did you?
I'm not a gamer at all. MC2, my little production company, is based 3 blocks away from Ubisoft Montreal, which is actually the biggest video game studio in the world now. So in the past few years, I kind of witnessed this tribe of programmers, designers, taking over all the neighborhood. They were a few hundreds, and there are now more than 3,000 people working in the studio in Montreal. And actually, that's the funny part. The building where my company was, Ubisoft took kind of 3 floors in this old building, and we had to move away because of Ubisoft. So I decided to take my revenge and to do this documentary. No, seriously, I thought, right, who are those people? They're now the biggest industry in the world, and it's 3 blocks away. So I had to find a story, and I just knocked at their door. And it took me several meetings to finally get access to a production team that was working on a new IP. Those guys were kind of confident enough to give me access to their floor. So I started shooting, and after, let's say, 8 months of this, they told me, all right, you cannot shoot anymore because we don't know if the game's going to be released. We're under pressure. We're competing against other game here in the studio in Montreal. So, and people are not very comfortable with you being in this process. So sorry, but you cannot shoot anymore. And it took me another 5 months to go back because I knew the game would be announced. So it would be a real game that will carry on. And from then I was able to have kind of a green card and do the film that I wanted to do.
So, having said that, let's take a look at the trailer.
War. The natural state of our species.
Knight, Viking, or samurai. Warriors are remembered because of the battles that they fight. What would you fight for?
Come on in! Ah!
I'm here with Jason, the Dark Lord Vandenberg.
I pitched this project for 10 years, and I was half convinced that I was crazy. But now, we gotta go.
We're in this together. We're gonna do a great fucking job. Showtime, people.
I devoted my life to entertaining people and to fill their hearts with new ideas. I can't imagine more meaningful work for me.
4 cops get out, and they're like, I need to see your cane. He goes, you have a sword in here?
These barbarians, they seem like they're good people, huh? That is all a lie. when night falls, they stab each other with their knives.
It's a really dark place that I'm in right now. My baby is being taken away from me.
We grieve the brutal murder, a horrific massacre of dozens of innocent people.
There is a lot of hate in this world. I think that art is a way to strike back against anger and oppression and violence. And it's all I've got.
Well, it certainly is unique and dynamic and broad looking, and you must have been devastated, at putting in 8 months, and then when they said you can't come back. I mean, so what happened at that point? What changed their mind, or how did you change their mind?
I mean, it was, it's probably like, I'm not the only director who has lived this kind of situation, but it was a risk that I took from the beginning because I had no financing at all. I was convinced that I had the story because of the character. You saw Jason in the trailer. You haven't seen Stefan, the producer, and Luc, the brand manager, but the three of them are very compelling characters. So I knew, like after a few days of shooting with them, that something would happen. It's from the beginning, I wanted to do a character-driven story, and add the best context to add the story, since this this game had everything in it to do a parallel in real life. It was a game about fighting, and those guys were fighting against other team within Ubisoft. And so I couldn't leave this project without trying again. So I went. Again, I tried everything. I mean, it's always about like finding the sweet spot between them having their own like confidence in you, and to be able to documentary is about what's the word in English, about empathy, and that's what I'm trying to create when I direct a film, empathy. And that's what I tried to create while I was trying to convince them to come into my story. I wanted them to be empathic to my my path, and so it was kind of just a human connection that, and they became Luc, Stefan, and Jason, kind of my collaborators in order to convince the whole Ubisoft studio here in Montreal, but also in Paris, because the head office is in Paris. Ubisoft is a huge multinational. So I think it's just their confidence in me that enabled me to have this kind of green card to do a film in one of the biggest studios in the world with a complete autonomy and independence, with them having no say on the edit. But it was, I mean, my work outside the shooting was more time consuming and more, I would say, difficult than when I was shooting, because I always had to like be able to have the access and and go at the good time, because it's always about timing as well. I mean, I was shooting for 4 years, but I wasn't there every day for 4 years, so I had to be there at the good moments. So yeah, that's about how I was able to go back and then carry on until the end.
And you mentioned that you had no financing at all. And I'm curious as to, did you pick up financing? What is the status of having somebody pay for this movie?
A broadcaster in Quebec to finally get on board after 2 years and a half. So that enabled me to do some more shooting. But actually, all of the post-production of the feature film, I just invested my money, and but I'm sure there's going to be some interest and good sales in the near future. So yeah, this is, I mean, the risky part, but I was willing to go all the way, and we'll see how the audience will react at Hotdocs, and then what will happen with the buyers.
This reminds me of when we produced the original Westdoc conference in Los Angeles. We had a pitch fest where I narrowed down to half a dozen people coming in and pitching movies, and one of the people that came in was another Canadian from the other side of Canada named James Swirsky, and his, I think, then girlfriend, now wife, Lisanne, and pitched a movie that you're probably familiar with called Indie Game the Movie.
Indie Game the Movie.
Oh, good. So you
Yeah,
know
of
where I'm
course.
going. And I think he told me afterwards they hadn't shot anything. They had nothing, and they started shooting the next day after they won the competition. We had a prize then. It was $7,500 or $10,000, and I think that helped launch their film. And they ended up making a fabulous film.
Yeah.
And as you probably know, or you may not know, James and Lisanne self-distributed that film in a brilliant way, I think, through
They did.
the Game Network. And I had no idea how much money they made or didn't make, but my gut feeling tells me that they did very, very well. Thank you so much, Jean-Simon. I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you very much, and hope we're going to see each other in Toronto on May 2nd.
So that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it, even with the hiccup in there with the audio. You get a pretty good idea of the depth and the variety of the fantastic documentaries that are available at Hotdocs. If you enjoyed this show, I hope you'll go to Facebook and like us, and YouTube, subscribe to our channel, Westdoc Online, and follow us. And the next scheduled show is scheduled for Wednesday, May 9th at 9:30 in the morning Pacific time and 11:30 Central time, as my friend Dina Gordon says in Chicago, and 12:30 Eastern time. So thanks very much, and we'll see you next time.
It's an amazing thing, actually, to sort of